All right, are we live? Good, looks like we are. This is P Line for Rail Fan Productions. We are going live tonight. Um, as you all probably know, this is regarding the strike on New Jersey Transit. This is the first time in 42 years that New Jersey Transit has undergone any sort of strike. The last time being in 1983, and that actually lasted for 34 days, so just over a month. New Jersey Transit just barely, by the skin of their teeth, averted a strike at the last possible second in March of 2016. They were supposed to go on strike on March 12th, and March 11th they met for a final negotiation. And at the very last second, the strike was completely averted. Unfortunately, that is not the case here. Um, the union met with New Jersey Transit for basically the better part of a month. Actually, 2 months. I think they started negotiating back in March. When they tried to settle on a deal, it was they were making about, I think it was like 10 cents less than the Long Island Railroad um, a year. So as you all probably know, they're being paid on salary, and this is basically their living wage is basically driving the train and working on the railroad and stuff like that. Um, so there are a lot of variables going into the strike. Um, I've been tuning into all the live press conferences, or as much as I could. I've been tuning in for the last 3 days straight. And I think even before that too, but mainly Wednesday through today, I've just been, um, tuning in for basically stream after stream, post after post, just trying to keep updated as much as possible. They are scheduled to meet again on Sunday for another negotiation, and that will hopefully um, settle the odds between the company and the union workers, hence the engineers. So we are in extremely uncharted territory. I will get to in a little bit what this is going to mean for us, especially for the production of the documentary, which I am pushing for a mid-July completion. That will involve all of the clips being done. That will involve the voiceover being done. If the strike is somehow able to lift within this weekend into early next week, expect by next Thursday or Friday that we will resume filming full force until this documentary is done. We've already covered a lot of ground. We've done the Gladstone branch, we've done good parts of the Northeast Corridor, and we've actually tackled a good handful of the Morris and Essex line by this point. The only areas that we still have to do are the rest of the oranges, Maplewood, Summit. Thankfully, a good friend of mine was able to do the filming duties for me, but I kind of want to get out there myself and do some on location filming on my end. There is a possibility to hit up Newark Broad Street again. We actually took a trip there when New Jersey Transit was hosting their free rides in the summer of last year, in the end of August. So that was pretty much a day just to film. But little did we know at the time that the filming we were doing for that day was actually going to be doing pre-double duty for this documentary. So that basically knocked it right out of the park. Really without us even having any intentions of doing a documentary at the time. So, and what's also good is for the Northeast Corridor, places like Princeton Junction and Trenton, I actually have old film that I reserved on my phone for me doing other trips out there for other reasons that were not related to a documentary. And the footage was basically good enough to go into the documentary. So, um, that footage will be used. However, since I have a newer camera now and the highest quality camera, I'd really like to use that and get some footage in with that. So reshoot some of those locations. If you keep up to date with my posts, I do post periodically when I'm going on location, as well as a filming schedule, which I will be doing the second that the strike is lifted. Um, so once this strike is ended, whenever that will be, I will resume um, documentary production and as well as certain spots that will be still left to cover. So back to the strike itself, because I know that's the main part of this post, because we are in, as I mentioned, we are in significant uncharted territory. Um, so let me tell you the reasons why this strike happened. Um, Basically, what happened was the engineers were working without a contract for the last 5 years, since 2019, if you really want to be technical about it. Um, they were currently making around $135,000 a year. And most people actually, if you really want to get technical with the numbers, the Long Island Railroad, they were making $241,000 a year, far less than what New Jersey Transit is making. As a matter of fact, the wages for New Jersey Transit are the lowest in the country. So they've out, they're far below Amtrak, Metro North, Long Island Railroad, all of the neighboring commuter railroads in this area. And I mean, forget about freight. So, because freight is what's been bringing in the most amount of profitability right now, if you can believe it. Um, Also, with the way our government is, um, with the tariffs, with inflation, um, prices are just through the roof. So, unfortunately, a lot of these companies do not have the money to basically pay these employees, not just at the railroad level, but at any business right now. This has been an ongoing occurrence on basically for the last couple of years. I know because I can relate to it personally, because I worked in some places that were shut down because of reasons just like that. Um, well, the reason why my place shut down was because of cheap. They wanted cheap labor, and that's why they moved production to Mexico. Um, but that's beside the point. But anyway, the engineers were requesting a pay raise of up to $190,000 to $225,000 a year. So the New Jersey Transit CEO, being as corporate as he is, and in my opinion, I don't know much about the previous CEO, but I can tell you that this current CEO, in my opinion, has to be one of the worst, most corrupt CEOs in New Jersey Transit's history. Um, so he says that he's there for the people, he's there for the employees, he's there for the engineers, but by watching the most recent press conferences, you can tell that that's not the case. He keeps reiterating the same point over and over and over again on an endless loop, and it's really not meaning much of a crap to anybody. Um, all he's focused on is basically just making money for the company, not for the employees. So, um, what the engineers did is they gave a deadline, a May 16th deadline, Friday, May 16th at 12:01 a.m., midnight, just, last night, to come up with a deal or they were going to walk off the job, period. And they did just that. They walked off the job. And this happened around 11 o'clock last night. They were meeting for final negotiations, and it was actually looking like a deal was going to be settled. They were very, very close to it, like literally inches away from averting the strike. We could have had another 2016 scenario, which is what everybody was hoping for. But unfortunately, that did not come to fruition. Um, Basically, it turns out what the news was just as they were about to negotiate and settle on a deal, the CEO walked out of the press conference and he actually went to address the public at Newark Penn Station. He was there with Governor Murphy, and they were, I think they had like a 40 or so minute press conference hearing with the public. Could have been longer than that. All I know is I tuned in for basically the last like 20 minutes of it. And it was already going on for about 20 minutes by the time I uh, tuned on. So, and if you all don't know, and this is basically if I'm going in a few different directions here, spare me for it. Because I do have quite a few things I do want to discuss in this chat. Um, also basically what the future will be for New Jersey Transit as well. This is going to sound like what my old posts used to be like when I used to do them years ago, but this is probably the most important and probably one of the most substantial ones I've ever done. So to give you all a little bit of a background, I'm just going to talk about basically New Jersey Transit as a whole. So back in the 1980s, um, New Jersey Transit basically came out of the birth of, not the birth, but New Jersey Transit came out of the original groundings of Conrail and the New Jersey Department of Transportation. Conrail um, basically started up a few years earlier. Their inception was back in April of 1976. So they were actually running during the merger because New Jersey Transit, as you all know, the predecessor companies, they were privately owned. We had the Pennsylvania Railroad, the Erie Lackawanna, and the Central Railroad of New Jersey, all running the railroad lines around here. So they ran all the railroad lines you see today. North Jersey Coastline, Northeast Corridor, Raritan Valley, Morrison, Essex. Each one of those railroads was privately owned by one of those railroad companies. The CNJ owned the North Jersey Coastline. They owned the Raritan Valley line. The Pennsylvania Railroad had the Northeast Corridor. Erie Lackawanna had the Morrison, Essex, the Montclair Booton, or what was back then the Montclair and the Booton line. They didn't merge until September of 2002 when the Montclair connection was completed between um, Kearney Junction and just outside of Bay Street, Montclair. Actually, where the two tracks merge, they're between Bay Street and Walnut Street, right in downtown Montclair. That's where the old line, which is basically a mix of freight and well, actually it's mainly abandoned now. No trains really use it at all. But freight did use it for a few years after New Jersey Transit ended service on that line. So it was basically used for locals. Norfolk Southern used it. Conrail used it. And they just used it for the local jobs in and out of Croxton. So that's a little tidbit there for you. So essentially, when New Jersey Transit came out of the ashes of these bankrupt railroads, which was Pennsylvania Railroad, Erie Lackawanna, Jersey Central, all the other railroads of the area, etc. Conrail took ownership for a few years just to kind of get the railroad back on their feet again. If you all want a real history of the railroad in this, we could go into this in a whole separate post. If you really want to talk about the history of railroads in this country, and ultimately what leads to these kinds of decisions. Back in what I would like to say the 1950s, before then, railroads were basically the only way to go in this country. People used them to go from place to place. They were used to transport all sorts of goods, passengers, people, luggage, just any type of thing that needed to be transported. The railroad was the way to do it. And for about, I want to say 100 years, give or take, the railroads were highly successful. However, the 1950s hit, and that's when ultimately you started to see a changeover from railroads to automobiles, aviation, and that all of a sudden became the way to do it because it was faster, it was easier, and it didn't take as long. You could just jump in a car and get on the highway and say if you were going, let's just say hypothetically, you were driving from here, where I live, out to Altoona, Pennsylvania. Okay, so that takes 4.5 hours for a driving distance. If you took a train, it basically takes all day. You would have to take a train from here, Red Bank, Little Silver, and Middletown, which are the closest train stations to here, or Long Branch. You would have to take a train up to Newark Penn Station or New York. You would have to get on an Amtrak, and you would have to take that down through to Philadelphia, where there's like a 40-minute or so layover because they have to change engines, which is known as an engine swap. And then they run the train the rest of the way out to Harrisburg, Altoona, and Pittsburgh, all totaling about a 7-hour trip. Just on the train, you factor New Jersey Transit connection into it, which is about an hour to an hour and a half to get up to Newark or New York from here. That's basically an all-day trip. So people back in the 1950s, they were like, why are we wasting all this time taking a train if the equipment is constantly breaking down? It's not being used, it's not being serviced properly. Why are we doing all this when we can just hop in a car, hop on the interstate, and get out there within a couple of hours? That literally takes half the chunk out of the trip. So they were like, why bother with the railroads? Why bother with them? So basically, by then, the ridership had declined so much that the railroads were on the brink of bankruptcy. So a lot of railroad lines had to be ultimately shut down. So, I mean, I won't name them because yeah, I would have to it would have to take a lot of facts and memorization on my part, a lot of research. But just as a whole, it was looking like by the time the 1960s hit, the end of the 1960s into the early 1970s, that the railroads were basically going to be extinct. Like, that was it. So Congress had to come up with a solution to basically save the railroad from its own extinction. And that was Amtrak in 1971. That was signed at the time by President Richard Nixon just to keep the trains going. So basically to keep that old storied past alive with the railroad. Now, there's been some controversy over the years about Amtrak. Um, is it the most reliable? Is it, all those questions that come into it. A good friend of mine, I won't name his name, but he mentioned that, which I find hard to believe. I don't know how much truth there is to this. I still question it. But he mentioned that Amtrak basically, almost in a way, destroyed the railroad industry, in particularly with freight, but because it almost seemed like everyone was forced to ride Amtrak. That's not entirely true. Amtrak runs like every other railroad. People ride it because they want to ride it. Amtrak basically gives you a sense of pride and a sense of history into the railroads of years past. Time's gone by, as they say. Um, it offers all the amenities you have. If you have a long distance trip, you have sleeping cars, um, you have dining services, you have coach, you have baggage services. It's basically what some people would say is like a hotel on wheels. And it depends on where you're going. Some trips take up to 3 days. Some trips take overnight. Some trips take a whole day. Some trips even take a few hours. It really depends on what type of train you want to get on and where you want to go. So basically, Amtrak started the what we know as passenger railroad service today. And meanwhile, as far as freight is concerned, Conrail took that over. And then in the mid to late 90s, Conrail was eventually absorbed into Norfolk Southern and CSX, which are the two main freight railroads in this section of the country. You go further out west of Chicago, you've got BNSF, a Union Pacific, Canadian National. There's a whole broad network of railroads in this country. And each of them pays their engineers and their conductors a pretty darn fair wage. Um, those railroads have been on the brink of, not bankruptcy, but they've been on the brink of a strike as well. I can name a few years ago, back in, what was it, September of 2022, that it looked like that Norfolk Southern, the CSX, was ultimately going to strike, and they weren't going to be running any trains. Whether it be due to pay raises or payroll, who knows? I don't remember the reason offhand. But I do know in particular why New Jersey Transit is striking. They've made it clear as day why they're striking. So it is very clear that railroads like Amtrak, even SEPTA, if you can believe it, they're all getting paid more than what the current engineers on New Jersey Transit are making. The fact they haven't had a raise in the last 6 years, it's amazing they're even still working. Let's just put it that way. Um, so we do not know essentially how long this strike will last. It could last a couple of days. It could last only this weekend, and rail service could be back up and running on Monday, hopefully. But let's not get our hopes up. Or it could be like 1983 and last for just over a month, 34 days. So that essentially raises the question, what will happen when rail service is resumed? Let's just say, hypothetically speaking, and hopefully this won't happen, but let's just say that rail service is resumed in the next 2 months. That would basically put it halfway through the summer in mid-July, which coincidentally is when I'm planning to have this documentary done. What would happen on our end? Today's what, Friday, May 16th? So say on Wednesday, July 16th, services miraculously they come to a deal and they resume service. Again, hopefully this won't happen, but I'm just trying to give you guys a sense of the bigger picture and what this is going to mean for us with this project. That would mean, because the new multi-level 3 EMUs that are replacing the arrows are supposed to come in January and February of next year, 2026. This is actually the latest they pushed it thus far. They were actually supposed to be in service now. Actually, middle part of last year, they were supposed to be in service. So they're already 2 years behind schedule. So there was talk in the mid to late 2010s that the arrows were going to be gone by the beginning of this decade. And we're already 5 years into the decade. So, and the arrows are still running. So back to what I was saying before. If there is a possibility that rail service is resumed in mid-July, which is right around the time that I'm expecting to have this document, hoping at this point, not expecting, but hoping to have this documentary completed, that means we will have from July all the way through December into January to finish up the locations, what's ever left. It seems like a lot of time, but in hindsight, it's not. We thought this was going to be a lot of time. I got out of work from the tax season in exactly a month ago. And I was like, oh, I've got every single weekend, every single day from now until the end of the year to do this documentary. Well, surprise, surprise, I find out right around April 30th, May 1st, the beginning of this month, that there's a strike happening in 2 weeks. If the union workers, the engineers, don't come up with any sort of a contract or a negotiation. And it seems like the CEO is outright refusing this contract. They are more focused on, as disgusting as it is, they are more focused on upgrading their facilities, upgrading the equipment, just spending money everywhere else but paying the employees, paying the engineers, giving them their fair wages. They are more concerned with that. And you want to know what their freaking excuse is? It will bankrupt the system. That's right. It will bankrupt the system. Well, you've already spent all this money on stuff that didn't need to be done. I was actually watching a briefing, a press conference briefing with one of the heads of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers, which is the union behind this strike. And he mentioned that in Newark, New Jersey, just a couple of years ago, during COVID, mind you, they actually took all this money and they bought themselves a whole new building to establish as their headquarters when they had a perfectly functional one just right down the street from them. Actually, I think it was next door to them. No, they spent all this money to buy this facility, refurbish it, redesign it, everything in between to make that their new headquarters when they had a perfectly fully functioning one next door to their complex. Then they spend all the money to upgrade the equipment. Actually, just as of this past Wednesday, 2 nights ago, right around this time, I think, they signed an agreement for 250 additional multi-level 3 vehicles to be in service by 2031. And what that's going to do is that's going to replace all of the remaining single level equipment so that it will just be fully equipped multi-level, period. So that basically means from that point, we will see no more single level comets anywhere in the system. What the current CEO wants to do, and actually previous CEOs have wanted to do this too, but it's really been made evident with this current one, that he wants to take the system because, I mean, let's not disagree with the guy. The cars are over 40 years old. Some of them are 50 years old now because some of them date back to the 70s. Take the Arrows, for instance. They came out about from Penn Central. Actually, the very first Arrow car was released back in 1968. And Penn Central was still in full swing at that time. Yeah, they were a couple years before bankruptcy, but they were still running. And that's when the term Jersey Arrow came in. That's what they were originally called for a couple of years. So you take that into consideration. Those cars run under Penn Central's power for about 10 years. NJ comes in 1979 and they take over the system. Actually, Conrail takes it over in 1976. So Penn Central ran them from 68 to 76, so a total of 8 years. Then NJ comes in the following year. They run the service between 1979 and 1983. That's when New Jersey Transit comes in, and then they take over official operations. So it was basically, I guess, seen as a way to more or less relieve the private railroad carriers from their duties, but they still had a lot to do, and they still had essentially a lot of ground to make up for, a lot of ground to cover. So basically, you get further on, and this is where I'm going to backtrack in a minute because I'm going to talk about the main inspiration behind this documentary since some of you might be wondering about it. I made quite a few posts about it, but I'm about to tell you right here what this documentary is really about. So, back in 1983, New Jersey Transit's first year, aside from the original strike, um, what happened was at the time, the Erie Lackawanna MUs, which had been around since the 1930s, they were on the verge of retirement. They were on their last legs. So, a railroad photographer, videographer, a documentarist at the time went out and documented the Erie Lackawannas along the entire stretch of the Morris-Essex line and the Gladstone branch, and even the Montclair line at the time. So that's essentially where this documentary that we're currently making now has its roots. It has its roots embedded in the 1984 original documentary of the Erie Lackawanna MUs, which at the time were basically on their way out the door, just like the Arrows are now. So that was actually done within a couple months before they were retired. They were retired in August of that year. So if I had to speculate a time frame, it looked like this documentary was produced during the summer months of 1984. Basically a couple of months, because in the very end of that documentary, if you've seen the documentary, you will see that the last 5 to 10 minutes of that presentation, of that video, basically goes over the very last run of the Erie Lackawanna MUs out of Hoboken. We might do something like that here. However, we don't know officially when their last day is. Because keep in mind, New Jersey Transit is probably going to deliver a few of these EMU sets at a time. So let's just say they come in January 1st of 2026. Let's just say the very first train set comes in on that day. It's going to take a few months to bring all the cars in because they're going to want to bring them in. They're going to want to test them. And that's going to take a little bit of time as well. So we may see some additional time with the Arrow MUs once the new multi-level EMUs come in. So how long that's going to take, it's basically a question of guessing. It could take a few weeks, it could take a few months. It could even take the whole year. We don't know as of yet. So we have to cover Hoboken Terminal anyway, because that is going to be a very strong pivotal point to this documentary, just like with the original documentary that was produced over 40 years ago. So, and however, this one also includes the Northeast Corridor. Because don't forget, the Erie-Lackawanna MUs did not serve the Northeast Corridor. They only served the Morrison, Essex, and the Gladstone branch. That was it. And the brief stint on the Montclair line. The Arrow MUs have covered twice as much ground as the Erie-Lackawanna MUs have. So the Arrow MUs basically covered every single line in the New Jersey transit system that was electrified. So again, Morrison, Essex, Montclair, Boonton, Northeast Corridor, North Jersey Coastline. If you want another brief little tidbit of North Jersey Coastline history with the Arrows, we only have to look about 20 years ago to 2003. During that time, the voltage was changed between Aberdeen, Matawan, and Long Branch. So with the change of that voltage, that basically prohibited the use of arrows to be used south of Matawan to Long Branch. So from that point, arrows were only going as far south as South Amboy and Matawan before the voltage change, which was right in between Matawan and Hazlitt. So it's funny, even as a 9-year-old at the time in 3rd grade, I already knew by that point the arrows were going to be out the door. Something was just keying that into my mind. I could just tell by what was happening at the time that the arrows didn't have much time left. Luckily, they were still going to be in use on the Northeast Corridor and the Morrison Essex line. So, but on the Morrison Essex line, they don't see as much service as you would think. They only see service on the Hoboken division of that line, not on the Newark division like we see on the Northeast Corridor. Also, the number of cars that are in each train set between the corridor and the Morrison Essex line. The corridor can usually see an average about 8 to 10 cars. The Hoboken division, which in theory has lower ridership for those cars, they only use about 3 cars, sometimes 4, on a given day. The other thing is, too, the Arrows see service on the Northeast Corridor on the weekends. Morrison Essex line, they do not, with the exception of the Gladstone branch. Which the Gladstone branch, they serve as a shuttle between Summit and Gladstone, which is why we placed significant emphasis on that on the weekends that we were able to. That was also the same type of deal that the Erie-Lackawanna MUs also went back and forth on a continuous rate. So they serve the shuttles on that line, just like the hours are doing right now. It's also interesting to think when you really think of the amount of time that the Erie-Lackawanna MUs were in service as opposed to, the Arrows. And contrary to the two, the Erie-Lackawanna MUs, they were in service from the 30s to the 80s, so a total of 50 years. The Arrows here came into service in the 70s. We are now in the mid-2020s. We're in 2025. So again, actually a total, not 50 years, but almost 60 years these cars have been in operation, if you want to go all the way back to Penn Central. So 1968, that was basically almost 60 years ago. So they've been in service now for 55, 56 years. So in turn, they are on the same time. They're on the same timestamp as the Arrow MUs are now. So you can really see between the two that oh, it's telling me to check my internet connection. Um so well, we're going to keep this going as long as we can. If we have issues and we need to restart, we need to restart, but hopefully that won't be the case. Um so and we're still going. The clock is still going, so that's good. Um so like I said, it really is the same amount of time between the two different between the sets of cars that are currently running. So, but that means when train service gets back into operation, that means we're going to really have to hit the gas if we're going to get this done between now and basically the beginning of next year, between now and January. That's going to give us about 5.5 to 6 months. So, assuming nothing happens like what's happening right now. So, basically, I have no set time for completion, but I really am, again, shooting for, if we're able to get this back on track, maybe within the next few weeks, we can still hit that mid July goal, but it might be extended to August. And if it is, it is. We can't really do much about it. I personally don't want to film in 100 and something degree heat with high humidity. I want to try doing it on the coolest days possible, because I tried it on a really warm day in April, the day before Easter, and I was wiped out by the end of it. So, and the summer, it's obviously going to be, you know, 10 times hotter than that. And plus, when you factor in the humidity. Um, so, there are a couple comments. I want to get to those. Frank Cornelli, who I knew from school, um, NJT Access Link is not affected. NJT Access Link buses, they will still be in operation. NJ Trans will be cross honoring tickets. So they say. Um, for those that have alternate means of transportation. Only train services of right now is affected. No other service within the New Jersey transit system is being affected as of yet. Um, yeah, Caleb, the it's going to affect your Lyft driving significantly, just because of the amount of traffic that's going to be on the roads. Don't forget, now we're going to be seeing double to triple the amount of traffic that we normally see, especially in areas up north. And this is with the trains. Now with no trains, the traffic is going to be absolutely compounded to what it normally is. So expect longer commute times, expect longer travel times, and allow yourself extra time to get places. I'm speaking for the commuters specifically. So until this is resolved, again, just try to basically try to allow yourself some extra time, because the roads are going to be a mess between now and when the strike is resolved. Again, we're only hoping it might not be any more than this weekend. But the way things are going, with how corporate money hungry the current CEO is, we may not see, this may just be like 1983 or greater. Hopefully it'll be the lesser of it. But we are anticipating a significant disruption in railroad service across the state of New Jersey. Over the next few days, next few weeks, next few hours, I will continue keeping on top of whatever reports come in, and I will make sure to bring them to you, whether it be a Facebook post or any sort of video stream. Also, follow me on Instagram, Pete Leiden for Railfan Productions, to get updates there. Because, again, I will be delivering those updates to you in real time as they come up. Yeah, John, that's a huge point. Beach traffic does start up the weekend after next. So the weekend after this upcoming weekend is Memorial Day weekend. That is usually New Jersey Transit's heaviest weekend of traveling, especially down here on the North Jersey coastline. The North Jersey coastline thrives off of beach traffic for the lower section, Long Branch to Bayhead. That is when they see their highest amount of ridership, is during the summer months. from Memorial Day weekend through Labor Day weekend. That's when they double the amount of trains, sometimes triple them. For quite a few years, they used to have express service from Hoboken, New York and Hoboken, all the way down to Long Branch and Bayhead. This was until right around 2004 or 5, and then they did away with it, and then they just made it hourly local service, and then they brought back the one-seat ride. No, they didn't bring back. They introduced a one-seat ride, and that brought back the express service between New York, Long Branch, Hoboken, New York, Newark, Long Branch, and Bayhead. I know I kind of did a jumble up on words there. So it's going to be very chaotic. And again, the highways are busy enough as they are, even with the trains. Without the trains, it's going to be a much heavier nightmare. So again, if you're going down there, allow yourself plenty of time to get down there and be very careful because the rate of accidents in the state now is higher than it's ever been. Every day when I drive up to work on the parkway, I'm always seeing at least one accident. I saw one today and I saw one a few days ago. Luckily, my traffic patterns weren't involved in it, but it was still there. So there's going to be a tremendous increase in vehicle traffic on top of what we normally see just because of the strike alone. All right, at this point, I'm going to see if there's any questions, if there's any other topics that you guys want to contribute because I've done just straight up talking for the last 41 minutes. So I could kind of use a break from talking. Um, but again, I will be giving you updates in real time. So just be sure to basically stay updated for that. I will be with you guys every step of the way. Everybody in the railroad community is going to be here every step of the way. The union's going to be here every step of the way. And God dare I say it, the CEO and the company, they will be here every step of the way as well. Because they want to get rail service back as quick as possible. I'm not guaranteeing it by the big nut job the CEO is, but I can tell you the engineers they want to start service again as quick as humanly possible, and they're willing to step in for a negotiation at any time to resolve this issue and get the trains back on schedule. So we're almost 45 minutes into this. Um, Again, I'm going to try to take any questions that anybody might have. Um, and then we're really going to see, where we're going to go. Um, I mean, as of right now, just stay updated. Just be sure to keep out for any updates. Keep an eye on the news. Just anywhere you get your news outlets. They're always posting stuff to YouTube. They're always posting stuff to all of the. Yeah, John, that's a good point. Um, refer to New Jersey Transit governmental page. Because New Jersey Transit government, they're mainly the ones behind the strike, as much as the engineers are. And they will be providing updates in real time as well. So you can basically stay up to date. And then when you're able to stay up to date, we're able to stay up to date. Um, we can officially get things going again. So, but I gotta admit, when I was going to work this morning, it hit me. It was that kind of day too. It was extremely. It was the heaviest, foggiest morning we've had in quite some time. But you could just sense it. There was that eerie feeling in the air. You just knew rail service was suspended. It was almost like everything just came to a stop. And that's just that uncertainty of not knowing what's going to happen next. It was honestly so eerie, it was almost scary. Just that night, just that morning after something big happens is basically when you get an instance like this. Um, again, I mean, I'm gonna basically, I mean, if you guys don't have any other questions or comments, I might just go ahead and wrap this up. This will be available on the main page for you to view if you want to watch it back. Um, Again, anytime there's an update, I will be sure to bring it to you live, whether it be a written post or some type of instant stream, just to give you a real, uh, just to kind of give you guys a real picture, real idea of where things are going. Again, we can only hope for the best at this point. We're not guaranteeing that service. We're hoping service is going to be resumed tomorrow or in the next few days, but we don't know. The next earliest negotiation meeting is some point on Sunday. A time has not been determined, but when, I mean, I'll be working a volunteer event on Sunday, but I will still stay on top of the news whenever I can, and I will be sure to bring you guys the updates as they come in. Because, you know, we want to get things rolling again, just like everybody else. So I may wrap it up. Again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. Um, I don't want to repeat myself, but just stay on top of the news. Wherever you get your news sources, wherever you get your news outlets, um, just be sure to tune in as much as you can. Um, there will be tons of headlines. There will be more updates, and hopefully, eventually, more train service. So we're probably not going to see it as some people are saying. We're probably not going to see it as soon as they come in. They're going to immediately, take out all the old stuff such as the hours. The new train sets are going to immediately come in. No. Either way, that's still going to take some time. That could take even the good part of the entire year of 2026 of next year till everything comes in, before we'll see the arrows officially gone. So, like I said, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. Any questions, feel free to reach out. You can always view this post back, and you can comment on it, and I'll be sure to answer any comments that you guys might have. On that note, guys, have a good night, and thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. We are all here together during this very uncertain time. All right. Good night, everybody, and take care.